Okay, welcome back, everyone. I know we're supercharged by Dr. Shavonda Jacobs-Young's call for real action. I couldn't appreciate her words more. And I think it was the perfect opening for our final panel, which means we're that much closer to cocktail hour. Nobody's listening? Okay. Yeah, cocktail hour. It's okay. No, we'll just leave it. It's fine. Okay, so this is our final session to get some feedback from the working group. So just allow me 1 minute to talk about where we are now and why these working groups are so important. Dr. Shavonda Jacobs-Young said there's insert name action plan. In fact, we have an action plan for soil health coming out of the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit. And we're really at a crossroads now, and how to take all this commitment we've seen and put it into implementation on the ground, to really turn it into action. And I actually see that right now we're at a crossroads. So I'm a soil scientist, and I've been a soil scientist my entire professional career. And we've often complained that soil has been overlooked. In fact, if you Google my name and soil overlooked, you'll find a number of blogs with that title. And we give all these explanations for why soil is overlooked. Maybe we're terrible communicators because most soil scientists are introverts. Maybe it's because soil is so ubiquitous on the terrestrial ecosystem that we take it for granted. So I say we're at a crossroads because we can no longer say that soil is overlooked. We just had 55 member states sign on to the Nairobi Declaration, committing political will to scale soil health in their nation. So now we have an even bigger responsibility. We spent decades raising awareness and increased intensification of this awareness raising since the UN Food System Summit. And now is the time to truly bend the curve on land degradation, bend the curve on soil degradation. We heard the chief scientist from the USDA talk about the multiple ecosystem services provided by healthy soil, but she also said something today that we haven't mentioned: farmer livelihoods. Healthy soil will improve and increase farmer livelihoods. And I think making that connection is really important. So now this panel is where we hear from the working groups, but we also look for cross-fertilization, collaboration across working groups, and we get to ask questions. And as you noticed, I tried to engage in every single working group. Some of them I was able to stay quiet, but then I gave up on that by like group 3 and provided input, the nature of who I am. But I found some really interesting common threads and trends, and I look forward to all of you doing active listening. So that means not texting, it means actively listening, and find those common threads or even gaps that we need to address from the working groups. For example, I saw a common thread. Every single group talked about generating and leveraging evidence and data, talked about collective action, which is really cool because that's what Samantha Power talked about, not just using USAID funded programs, but leveraging other partner programs, the need for raising awareness, and this idea of identifying the role of various stakeholders and the actual role and responsibility that all of us and the different stakeholders have to make this action plan a reality. I am not going to say the names of everyone because I'm not sure if you've changed your representative. So I welcome the working group representatives to come to the panel, and we will start the discussion. So we can clap for them as they come up, please. And I see 7 chairs, so I'm expecting 6 panelists. Great. So I've already given you a lead-in, Vara Prasad, Dr. Vara Prasad, about the research and evidence, and also because we don't want your slide to be up here the whole time.
Sure.
So before you go, we really would like to hear about what specific recommendations the research and evidence group has, and also think about your ask from the other groups, right? So that you can really make sure we're doing, what is the word? Actionable research. Thank you.
How much time do I have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
Before.
Sure. So I'll go very fast. So first of all, thank you very much for giving me this fantastic opportunity today to speak here in front of you. And this is a collective effort which was done through multiple methodologies. First, we co-created a survey. We implemented the survey with about 200 scholars around the world. And then we had a survey results, which I'm going to be skimming through. And then we had the workshop today, where we brainstormed the research gaps and the opportunities, and 2 recommendations for the 3 questions which we asked. So I'll skip the initial piece, the rationale you all know, the Nairobi Declaration, the 10-year action plan. So there was a need to implement some critical ideas. So we implemented a survey, sent it out to 900 people, 200 responses in first 10 days without any reminders. So the survey will be open. If anyone is interested, we'll send you the survey, and then you can get us the information. So we classified the survey in 4 questions. One was policy, one was access, one was focused on efficiency, another one was human and institutional capacity. So there were 55 questions. So considering the time I have, I'm not going to talk about the results of the survey, but I'll at least highlight some of the key areas. One of them is that, do you see a relationship between fertilizer use and soil health? 33 plus 28 said that they're unaware of the soil health concepts and they don't see a relationship with fertilizer use. So there is a need to be better communicating that information. And then another one was, what are the areas which needs most research? Develop soil tests, lab and rapid to calibrate soil health and nutrients. That was very, very clear on that one. And then what's the most limits the application? Fertilizer cost was the big one, and not knowing how much to apply and which nutrients based on the soil and crop needs. And then how do farmers use their fertilizer decisions right now? On their own experience, 65%, and then they get an advice from the consultant also based on their experience. Very few are using the soil testing and other methodologies. And what's the one thing farmers could do to improve production practices? Use combined soil health and proper fertilizer practices was overwhelmingly a result. And then what's the most important thing that would be advised to the farmers to do to improve soil health? Increase soil organic matter unanimously. Almost 38% of them said that. And then what would you like most to measure? It's soil organic matter, including soil carbon was one of the key things as a measure of soil health. And the last question, or last slide, is that which statement about the availability of the human resources and fertilizer and soil health was there? Lack of resources to hire qualified people. Even if funds were available, some 60% said that qualified people are there, but the 24% said that even if we have the resources, we do not have the qualified people. So that's a report from the survey. And then we did a lot of topics today. We asked these 3 specific questions. The goal is to improve efficiency, resilience, and sustainable use of mineral fertilizers. We did the gaps and the opportunities. The goal was to increase access, affordability, use of mineral and organic fertilizer, gaps, opportunities, enhanced human and institutional capacity, gaps and opportunities. So there was about 50 or 60 people online, and there was about 20 people in the group, in the room. So we used a mural board and asked them to type it on these Post-its, and they were all placed up there. Thanks to Caroline and her team for helping us there. So these are the gaps, these are the opportunities. We spent quite a bit of time on those, and I know it's difficult to read, but this presentation and the documents will be shared. And then similarly, we do it for the second question about access affordability of mineral and organic fertilizers. Then we did for the human and institutional capacity. We skipped the policy one because I know there was another group who was focusing on policy, so that's why we didn't ask that question, and there was not enough time as well. So the recommendations from each of these topics, I'm just putting 4 of them. I'll read the first 2 and remaining you can read. So about the efficiency and resilience, need for basic soil fertility data, field scale, nutrient supplies, neutral removal balances, and need for hyper-local level spatial and site-specific data. And you can read the other ones: improve the resource use efficiency, train the farmers, create unified platform frameworks. And then the second question was, how do we increase access affordability? Create market opportunities to fill the geospatial gaps where distribution is not meeting the crop needs. Use geospatial and digital tools to identify market opportunities. Decentralize the production. Focus on local production and formulation of organic and inorganic fertilizer sources. Capture the value add from formulation locally. And then for the last question, create a platform and mechanisms for support for co-learning, collaboration, and incentivize the partnerships between universities, research organizations, NGOs, industry, and extension services. And the last one was effective curriculum, openly available education material for engaged scholars from youth and women and local indigenous knowledge and others. Focus both on short-term and long-term training. Thank you very much for that.
Wow, that was well done. So does everyone have their notebook? Yeah. Show me. If you need a piece of paper, someone with a notebook will give it to you. Questions, immediate thoughts you have, write it down. We can collect them. We want to make sure that these recommendations, once we revise them, have input from everyone here. We've been talking all day, so let's make sure if you have any ideas, immediate reactions, don't lose them. Write it down, and then any of our rapporteurs can come pick them. Now, you know, in a debate, when someone's debating and they say the other person's name, then they're allowed to respond. I heard policy from the evidence group. So I think it is natural for us to move to the group that has 2 co-chairs, because enabling environment really requires that. So we'll start with Charlotte, and I will let you please introduce yourself. And then I think we'll move to your co-chair, Richard Makandawari, to fill in any gaps and perhaps give the Malawi perspective. So please introduce yourself.
Excellent. That was a tough act to follow. I feel like I have to really talk super fast now. So I'm Charlotte Hebebrand. I'm with IFPRI. I do communications and public affairs. I used to be with the International Fertilizer Association, so this is a favorite theme for me. And congrats to IFDC on their anniversary. So I had the pleasure to co-convene this discussion along with Dr. Makandawiri and David Spielman from IFPRI. I don't know if he's still with us. There he is. Hi, David. So we had a really great group. This was actually the second time we met. I think we might have been the largest group, just saying.
There's no competition here at all.
Just trying to inject a little humor. So we really had 2 big topics that we discussed today. So the first one I would summarize as a discussion about where and how to engage. So let's go to the how first. There was unanimous, I think, agreement that a group like ours, which actually included a number of African partners, can only work with African partners, with local institutions. We had Anthony Chapoto with us remotely from RENAPRI, which is the Association of National Think Tanks, Agri-Food Think Tanks, and MAPATA, which Richard is going to talk about in a little bit, of course, is a member of. That was a very important point that all of us felt very strongly about. We also thought it was really important to include all kinds of other stakeholders within Africa. So that would be the NARS. We talked about having the ministries, not just of agriculture, but also environment and finance. We spent a bit of time about the need to really build coalitions. If you're going to sort of shape the enabling environment, you need coalitions. You need a lot of trust among the coalition members. Then we talked about the where should we be engaging? And we talked actually about different levels. So we thought maybe there are some issues that have to be looked at the international level. And this was actually already a discussion that came up yesterday at IFDC about, for example, the debt crisis, right? Can African countries really solve the soil health problem without, if they're heavily indebted, right? So that's a big topic, obviously, for the international community. Then we thought, obviously, at the continental level, it's very important to engage on policies. And one of the most immediate asks here, I think, of the group was to look at the CAADP agenda, which many of you may know is in the process of being adapted, if you will, to the next 10-year framework, the post-Malabo framework. So looking at how CAADP will now, which right now has 2 indicators related to fertilizers, how does that need to be adapted in light of the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit? Then we talked about the importance at the regional level, right? How can we engage with the regional economic communities? And then, of course, we all agree policies are actually made at the country level, right? So really very important to work at the country level. And I think Richard will tell us a little bit more about Malawi. And then also the how we should work, and this gets to your point that I think all the groups talked about, is what's the evidence? What's the data? Right, so for a group, a policy group to engage with stakeholders, we have to come with some analysis, some evidence, and most of that analysis and evidence already exists. We just need to bring it together and make it understandable to policymakers. So then the second half of our discussion focused on repurposing, and I lost track, but I would probably think that repurposing is one of the words that is the most mentioned in the Nairobi Declaration, in the 10-year action plan, and maybe even on the soil health framework. And yet, do we really know what we mean when we talk about repurposing? So we thought it was really important to very quickly try to clarify in simple terms what all repurposing encompasses. It is perhaps taking a look at the fertilizer subsidies and thinking about other ways in which that money could be spent to also promote soil health. But it may also include other things because there are market distortions as well in many African countries. We talked about what are the kinds of incentives that we could build into a new way of providing support to farmers? Could there be ecosystem service payments for soil health? But the point was also made by our colleagues from CRS that in some cases, actually, there's an immediate reward for doing good practices on the farm, and there may not even be a need for payment, and that the payments, that sort of public good payments, would have to come in sort of on common in the commons rather than privately held land. We thought it would be very important to really explore in a broad sense what is meant by repurposing. What does it mean in the African context? What does it mean in the context of fertilizer subsidies? And so that's something that we're really excited to work on. The World Bank has done a lot of work. IFPRI's done a lot of work. MSU has also looked at this topic. So I think obviously a very big one on the policy front. And then very briefly, we talked a little bit about the importance of trade policy, of course, also another very important policy realm. And we would love to partner with ideas with the private sector group. We talked a bit about the private sector and the finance group, which we understand also looked at fertilizer subsidies. Thanks.
Great.
Richard.
Here you go.
Yeah, right. Very briefly, in Malawi, we have actually, I give an example of what we're doing in Malawi, and we have already begun the process of building a coalition of network of partners, which include CG centers, ICRISAT, CIMIT, IFPRI, and others, but also the private sector, but more importantly, civil society organizations, because these are individuals that are in touch with the communities on the ground. Such as Catholic Relief Services, who are doing great work on the ground, because also would like to incentivize the government to know that there are things happening. So it's not all about the crisis although we need to demonstrate that crisis, the gravity of the problem. For many years, I mean, Malawi has lost, thousands of tons of soils off to Lake Malawi, and exporting the soils to the Indian Ocean in the process. That gravity of the problem needs to be brought to the attention of the leadership. So included in that is deepening engagement of some of the politicians. So we're working with a policy institute, which is now going to be signing a memorandum of understanding with the parliament so that we can bring to the attention to parliament the gravity of the problem. So that's one of the priorities. But also we appreciate that, there's actually a lack of capacity of local institutions in, having the gravitas to engage maybe robustly with evidence. And within that coalition, we'd like to make sure that we bring on board some of the global institutions, including, the IFPRIs, but more importantly, in our case, we're working very closely with Michigan State University, the Food Security Group, and others there who are, have been there, for many years, working with African institutions. Because this has got to be a collective voice. Sometimes, this global additional voice brings in additional credibility, particularly if, the individuals participating in that conversation are, individuals with some degree of authority in terms of they've got a track record, in terms of what they have been able to generate over many, many years. So that is actually an important area of focus. But beyond that, I think we also discussed that we need, I think, to, be very intentional in identifying where can we have champion countries as well. Malawi is actually one of the champion countries because the action plan has already been developed there. But where are the other, champion countries? But beyond that, of course, we need to identify champion individuals. Who are these individuals that can really provide, excitement and leadership, and extending that voice. At one point we heard from Samantha Power that she was asking, where's the voice of African leaders? That voice of African leaders needs to reverberate in this process. And beyond that, of course, we would like to make sure that they speak at the regional level and at the global level as well. So in the upcoming events at the global level, would like this conversation to be sustained by these African leaders working very closely with the researchers who are on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. So thank you so much for highlighting the various levels, because that's where action takes place on the ground, but it can be influenced all the way through the international fora. And I think with this year having 3 COPs, we certainly have an opportunity and almost a responsibility to make sure soil health is highlighted at the climate change COP, the biodiversity COP, and our very easily friend, the UNCCD COP. So I think, thanks for mentioning those various levels. So I heard finance and private sector, so I'm going to go with Martin next. So, so Martin, you basically decide who gets to go after you with, you get to name them. So really would like to hear from the financial sector, and I spied a little bit on some of your ideas and some of the radical ideas I heard. So please share with us some of the recommendations, but please introduce yourself fully.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I'm Martin Paul Tebila Jr., an economist to the World Bank, where I support a lot of projects, but very relevant for this is the fertilizer roadmap for West Africa, reading back from the Lomé Declaration to the African Fertilizer Soil Health Summit and the Nairobi Declaration. And I was leading the finance group. It was supposed to be the most populated. But unfortunately, I think it was the smallest, and I wasn't sure why, because we always believe that without finance, nothing happens. But it feels like things are changing and is moving more to the knowledge side, which I think is very important. Let's concentrate more on knowledge and getting things right, getting the business models right. And when these are happening right, then of course the finance is going to come. But we had a very great discussion. We discussed on many things, but most importantly, we're wondering about how scattered funding is when it comes to aspects of fertilizer increase, aspects of soil health in the region. We can think of different institutions all working to address these goals, but doing that in silos. You have the World Bank, you have Akonrabo Bank, you have IFAD. We never meet on a common table, and even when we meet on a common table, we never work together. So it's very important that, first of all, we understand who are the actors working on these various aspects, kind of like a mapping exercise to know where funding is going to so that we avoid duplicated fundings. And directly flowing from this is really enhanced collaboration. We need to collaborate, and this is something that came up very strong. And this is one of the first steps of collaboration, sitting on the same table, kind of putting on the same thinking hats, and kind of looking at the issues that we really, really care about. But another thing, when it comes to collaboration, it's really the whole aspect of co-ownership of the work we are doing, getting our clients involved, getting our partners involved, getting the governments involved. It's a bit surprising sometimes when we sit in a lot of these meetings and it's really high level. We don't get the government. We don't get to get a buy-in. Everything starts from them. So no matter how important we do this, if they don't give us the buy-in, it's really never going to happen. So it's really in the framework of not really giving the fish, but really enabling these governments learn how to catch the fish. And also, it's also a lot about governmental policy. Strengthening institutions, getting the policies right, such that the private sector can have a big say. This whole aspect of PPP, public-private partnerships, because if at all the private sector has a lot of role to play and then the government is not creating an enabling environment, things are still not going to happen when it comes to increasing fertilizer use and making sure our soil is being retained. And directly in really pushing this fertilizer use and maintaining soil health is the whole thing about extension systems. I know this seems like an old sword. It's been there for a while. People have moved from really public extension to private extension, but the same results are there. It's still very low productivity. So it could be that the extensions are not working. So it's really a question of knowledge, supporting extension systems, not just supporting the extension system to support farmers, but also really to support the extension agents, because in many cases, they are not very well kind of have the best education to even push that to the farmers. And if we do this, this is a really big aspect of reducing the knowledge gap. And another aspect that came up very strongly is the fact that we always think that most of the funding should come from the government, but the private sector has the biggest share, they have the biggest job to do, and private sector financing is very huge, and we have to harness that. But just like I mentioned above, if the enabling environment is not there, then the private sector has a very little role to play. And when it comes to the private sector, it's really a lot about strengthening institutional capacities. So we know a lot about the advantages of various VSLAs, various contract farming schemes, cooperative membership, kind of really rallying indigenous knowledge. It's important to strengthen that as a big way to really get the stakeholders together. And one of the last points we discussed into how we as international stakeholders can really come together, it's really about knowledge sharing. A lot is happening in different countries, but since the stakeholders don't talk, then there is really there is no knowledge sharing. Success stories are not being disseminated. Like in Ethiopia, extension, it's really a great thing. It's working, it's increasing productivity, but just the countries that are close to Ethiopia, they don't have the same extension system. And one could think of this knowledge sharing as really important in building or moving the drive away from food insecurity. And the next question we used to ask ourselves was, when we harness all these advantages, what resources, how can we really push these various points back to the communities? And, we're thinking of some mechanisms to really ensure that we are really achieving this goal of increasing fertilizer use, maintaining our soil health. It's really important to feed the soil that feeds us, right? And one key thing that came out strong in our discussion is the role of youths. It remains an untapped resource in Africa. It's one of Africa's greatest resource. And I think the previous speaker was mentioning that a lot of youths are going away from agriculture. They are leaving the rural areas. They're going to urban cities to look for better jobs. just because they find agriculture not to be profitable. So how can we bring back the youths into all of this? This brings us into a lot of the discussion as well on climate adaptation, climate mitigation. They have a lot of potentials that can support this. And related to this, this is something the bank is doing a lot, supporting digital innovations in many parts of Africa. Most of these digital innovations are being led by the youth. How can we keep on supporting, bringing in aspects of scaling to make sure that the youth remains entrapped into this whole discourse of increasing productivity, because the future is ours, the youth. So the future is ours. So we really need some support to kind of push this whole agenda forward. And I think you came at some point and we're also talking about research. Right? In as much as we believe that extension systems have to be right, it has to be science-based. It has to be research-based. Things have changed over time. There are new methodologies, there are new tools, there are new innovations. How can we make sure these innovations, these new tools, these new research methodologies really inform what we are doing? So research is a big key player in all of this and should not be looked upon. And also, we also looked at aspects of reverse value chains, kind of moving from consumers back to producers, not just always looking at producers, and directly thinking a lot about processing, right? Because if we think about processing, if we think of strengthening local processing, strengthening downstream value chains, it's going to speak a lot to what consumers want. And if this is gotten right, what the processors are going to want, they're going to give back a lot in terms of research and development back to the farmers from which they are sourcing most of their inputs. But as it stands, most of what Africa does, it's really the production of raw materials, which is exported. A critical case is cocoa, which goes away and then comes back as chocolate. But it will strengthen local processing firms and plants. This goes back to kind of strengthen production systems. Yes, I'm going to complete soon. We're also thinking a lot about soil maps and healthy soils. It's important, just in the line of research, to really have maps that are digitalized and kind of make it very easy to farmers, because no matter how good we talk about improving fertilizer use, it's not going to work if farmers don't even understand their soil characteristics. You're just going to keep on applying fertilizer on a soil which you know nothing about. So it's really important to understand the kind of soils that farmers are working on. I think that is it for now. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. So did I hear that you're part of the youth consortium? You're part of the youth? How many youth do we have here? Patrice, you're part of the youth? Yeah, so I think note for next time, more youth here, yeah? I mean, I feel youthful. I just don't think I'm in the included in the youth category anymore. And also, going back to what Administrator Power said, she says, great when partners' values align, and even more powerful if their interests and values align. And that goes with this kind of blended partnership, right? And I think you mentioned private sector. So I'm super happy to bring on the next lead of the private sector group, Kathy Mathers, and she will introduce herself. And I hope people are still writing down their ideas, because otherwise I'm definitely handing the microphone over during Q&A, so be ready. Here, you can use this one. Oh, is it working?
Is it working? Yes, it is. Yes. Okay. And I'm the only one probably sitting between most of you and a nice reception this evening. The private sector group met. One more. Private sector group met online 2 times. We had 2 calls and narrowed down a list of some ideas we had for where we could, what was our superpower? Where could we make the greatest impact? And then, of course, they all kind of got, I wouldn't say blown up, but we got here, and then the discussion benefited for more robust opinions, and which is great. So a couple of big takeaways for our group. We heard Administrator Power talk this morning about OCP and Yara and how involved they are. And as a representative of the Fertilizer Institute, they're member companies of ours, I'm really proud of that. But we did have folks in the room remind us that the private sector role shouldn't be viewed as only for large companies. There is room for folks throughout the value chain to become involved in private sector solutions. Another point made initially is that as we look at the 2006, the first Africa Fertilizer Summit, that there has been almost revolutionary change in the systems and distribution channels in Africa. And so there's been quite a bit of positive change. The need, we really understood, I think this group really understood that nothing is going to work if we don't involve, the involvement of governments and extension is viewed as very necessary. A major point coming out of this was about not over-engineering solutions. And as someone who mostly deals with U.S. agriculture, it's easy to think about precision ag and what we do here in the U.S., but perhaps it's more important to kind of step back a moment and look at where the need is in Africa. And we had one participant say that, in some cases, it isn't even a fertilizer issue, it's a pH issue. And are there increases in soil health and increases in productivity that could come not by precision applying fertilizer, which they don't have the tools to do, but by perhaps doing having some regional maps created that allow growers to see kind of where the major deficiencies are in their particular regions. And that becomes a bit of a baby step toward, a more engineered agriculture. Farmers and ag retailers need to see it work. So whatever we do, we definitely recognize that. Affordability, I would be remiss if I did not mention that continues to be an issue. And just that the need for, it appears that there are certain areas where we have really robust private sector engagement, and then others where there is not. And I walked away from this asking, how do we multiply, or how do we, what's the force multiplier for what is already happening in the private sector?
Oh, wow. Within time. I'm too energetic. I'm messing up the microphones. Thank you so much, the force multiplier. And also, when you were speaking, I was thinking about what are these measurable progress indicators to show that we're actually having impact on the ground. So I think excellent points. And we have one more working group for a report back. And I think it's natural to end with the producers and consumers, and really look forward to hearing what recommendations your group has. And then after Tebila speaks, we will have time for a Q&A. So make sure there are no softball questions. Everyone will have to earn their drink tonight. So over to you. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, this is Tebila Nakelse, and I'm working for the Global Agricultural Productivity Initiative at Virginia Tech University. So I'm happy to summarize the finding of our group. There is one idea that kept our attention during that group, and it was difficult for us to get away with that information. And every discussion we had turned around it. So we took the case of the farmer, for example. So going from his farm and going to the market to buy fertilizer. What's the most important thing for him? For him or for her. Thank you so much. It's about information, It's about knowledge. It's about training. What am I going to buy? And so what soil? And we think that knowledge and information for farmers are the beginning or the foundation on which we can build the other policies, the other actions, to help them. So we took it in the perspective of, let's say, the political and the policy and the political agenda. So raising the awareness on soil health, give it more strength in the political debate in the way that it's easily on the table, the policy debate. So for sure, we know that at the international level, we have soil health raising at the international agenda and on the table of the African Union. So giving the information and training to farmers and awareness to farmers on the ground, for their soil. So we'll be able to raise this issue to a table of the national agenda so that we have an alignment between what is doing at the continental level and at the national level. So we also think that, for example, in the case of the process, we are having the debate on the post-Malabo debate, So soil health monitoring is important. So how do we monitor the soil health? At the international level, at the local level now. This one member, had a great proposition of maybe creating and maintaining a soil health index, so that it can be a tool that we are using for our policy debates. And nationally and internationally, we are tracking the process towards the health issue in the world and then at national level. But we thought also on the private sector, area, and the discussion turned around the fact that we should strengthen the regulatory framework, because most of the time, farmers are not getting what they paid for. There are some asymmetric informations, because normally the fertilizer they buy should be adapted to the soil they have, And most of the time, it's hard that private sector, they have information knowing that this fertilizer is good for this type of soil. So the regulatory framework should be strengthened, especially the labeling of fertilizer should be reinforced so that farmers knows what they are buying. And you see, we are circling around the thing of information and knowledge and education. So one additional thing that we really thought is important, it's soil should not be also restricted to fertilizer. We should give the information, the training to the farmers so that they have choices. We should open the bundle or alternative to them to know what to choose for the specific constraint that they are facing. So, and then information, knowledge, education, and then bringing to them what we have as best information, and then discovered by the research will be key for helping them and helping us also. And one key issue also, we agreed on the fact that, we should see soil health as part of the bigger picture. It's not only soil health. We should think it on the perspective of bundling. Talking about soil health, you are bringing all the key foundational input that's important to produce food. You are speaking about water. You are speaking about even the labor use. You are speaking about the equipment use. So we should think the soil health in these bundling perspectives, so that's to address all the multifaceted aspect of the issue. So those are the, yes, I forgot, I remember now. So, and then we have one participant, I think that's also important, saying that, yes, it's important to give information and education, but also we should make sure that we avail the best technology out there. And for that, we were discussing on the soil testing, which for some is really expensive for us, but it's like in the research we are having, innovative solution that can be less expensive. And we think it's important to democratize the soil testing, to farmers so that they are able to test their soil when they want, where they want it, that's one of the solutions, one of the propositions we have for the entire group. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I hope you'll agree that there was lots of cross-fertilization across all groups. There's no one who stayed in their silo. And I think that collective action is certainly what is going to be needed for implementing an action plan. And also, as someone who does soil health monitoring for the last 20 years, it's great that every single group mentions some sort of soil testing, soil mapping, soil health index. It's awesome. 2 questions. We will have time for 2 questions. And if you don't want to ask your question and just want to give feedback, you can hand your piece of paper to our rapporteurs. And we're actually not moving on to the closing until we get 2 questions. So, oh, thank you, because I really wanted, I'm not going to preempt what you're going to say.
Yeah, so Lisa Tiemann, I'm a soil biologist at Michigan State. My question is, how can we do a better job of connecting, or making public and private partnerships? So how can we do a better job of connecting researchers with the private sector? Because you're asking about soil maps and knowing where pH is the limiting factor, and I think as soil scientists, we know that, some of that stuff, and we would be happy to share that knowledge. So how can we do a better job of connecting?
That question could count for 2 because it's such a big one, but one more question from the crowd. Oh, come on, guys. Who's going to save us? Ben? Are you going to save the team? Anyone else a question? Oh, you can?
Integration, basically, sorry. This integration and overlap of the topics of the 5 discussion groups should basically come back in those 10-year plans, right? And so the question is how we're going to do that. So make sure that they're not only focused on fertilizer or soil health and technicalities, but equally on enabling environment, business, finance, the whole stuff. How do we do that?
Okay, great. So this is great. So who wants to tackle the question from our colleague at Michigan State? Okay, Charlotte.
Just maybe putting on my old hat. So the International Fertilizer Association put together a scientific panel, which is led by Achim Doberman, former CG colleague from Erie. And I think it's proven to be quite helpful, and it's a way for the industry to be able to engage with really some of the brightest minds in the fertilizer, plant nutrition space. But I think that could be a model, and maybe that should be broadened more broadly to soil health issues as well. And of course, those 2 topics are interlinked.
Who else? Oh, Farah Prasad, I was actually coming to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. Obviously, it's very important to have collaboration between public-private sector. One of the things which we have done in our Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab is to create a platform where there is an opportunity for interaction. And we did that in multiple countries, but I specifically would like to give you an example of Cambodia, where we created a Center for Excellence for Sustainable Ag Intensification and Nutrition. So that center brings in public, private, and developmental partners and the government sector extension agents on quarterly and semi-annual basis to make sure that there is a platform for interaction so that they know what is the pipeline of research, what are the products available, and who is the best scaling partner to collaborate with to make sure that these innovations are going at scale. And the second example is the similar side of concept calling iReach, Innovation in Research, Extension, and Advisory Services, created in collaboration with CORAF in West Africa, serving for 5 countries, Senegal, Burkina, Niger, Mali, and Ghana. There we took a concept of an agricultural technology park. So what we did was we developed or created a technology park in those countries, either at the National Agricultural Research Centers or in high schools or at a university where all the available technologies which are in the phase 4 in terms of USAID classification ready to be scaled. So those are physically showcased at one place. That way private sector will come in and then see if there is an opportunity for scaling. When I mean private sector, we are not just talking about the large, big companies. Even individual entrepreneurs and individual business people or business folks are included in that private sector. Because if you're only looking for big companies, they're not going to be many who are active in specifically the Feed the Future countries, which we are working on. So providing that platform where they can actually interact, learn from each other is going to be the initial starting point. And then all of this collaboration comes at a cost. So there has to be make sure that there is some incentives or cost financial resources in place to bring these people together.
Great. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Be quick here. Thank you for asking that question. It's a question we at the Fertilizer Institute have been asking, so I would say, please give me your card before you leave because I'd like to continue this discussion. But what I would say is that both the vocabulary and the cadence of communication is completely different when you look at corporations and science. And I think that is something we've been really trying to bridge, is to figure out how we can better take science and make it make sense for our members. And so to the extent that there is, that we do have an agronomist on staff now, if there is something we could be doing, I'm all ears.
Great. Okay, oh my goodness, now, go ahead. Good job. Oh, go ahead, Christine.
I just want to add on, we should not forget the small scale fertilizer manufacturing. In Niger, is a product we call activate phosphate rock. And at the village level, we were, a private entrepreneur was able to make this type of fertilizer where we just combine phosphate rock with a small quantity of diammonium phosphate. The cost was just the third of the commercial DAP, but the productivity was as good as DAP. And I think those type of local medium size, to the village level, to do some of the product, we should not forget about them because it can have a very huge impact. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. So now I have given none of our panelists any warning, but I'm going to give you each one word, and maybe if you hyphenate it, it can go to 3 words. A call to action, something that you really want to leave a lasting word to the audience. Yes, we're going to start with Tebila. So what is your call to action, either from your personal perspective, from your organization, from your working group, to motivate us as we close out this day where we've just been drilling in this topic? So you will say your word and we'll pass the microphone on. Go for it.
Only one word. So it's.
You can say one thing.
Okay. So I would say, let's democratize the information. Great. And the farmer, they will themselves lead us toward the solution.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's urgency at the national as well as regional as well as continental level to build these coalitions that will sustain the conversation going into the future.
I would say broader One Health, starting with soil health, leading to plant health, to human health, to ecosystems health.
Yeah, I would say let's keep the conversation going, but let's move more from words to action. Action now.
Thank you for involving the private sector in this discussion. We are often not present, probably due to our own fault, and so we just appreciate being here, and let's keep the lines of communication open.
I'm going to go with partnership.
And I'm going to go with we all have a responsibility to take action. Let's thank our amazing panel. Thank you.